Stealth is very known for being overpowered in this game. It can be used to steal anything from anyone or skip past encounters and areas completely. But just how much can you skip using stealth? Is it just a few spots, or would it be possible to beat this game without being seen by anyone? Not being allowed to be seen completely transforms the way we have to think about encounters in this game. Any normal person would just walk up to enemies, engage in combat, and then go from there. But if we want to beat this game without being seen, that won't be an option for us. So let's put down some ground rules. A person counts as seeing me if any dialogue or cutscene is triggered where they directly speak or look at us, or we lose our sneak status either just normally or from combat starting. The only exception to these rules is if combat starts while we are still either sneaking or invisible, in which case the enemies won't have any idea where we are anyways. When it comes to race, there are a few options for being seen as little as possible. There's Deep Gnome for its advantage on stealth checks, Dwergar for its permanent invisibility at level 5, and what I ultimately decided on, Halfling, who also gets advantage on all stealth checks alongside its lucky feature. I also made sure to go for Urchin for the free +5 to stealth and sleight of hand. For class, I went with Wizard as it gets immediate access to the very useful Minor Illusion and the game's best mobility spell, as long as we start with 16 strength. We wake up, take 5 steps into the next room, and immediately run into our first problem, Lae'zel. If we walk in normally, in the cutscene she ambushes us and then drags us into combat with 3 imps. So we clearly cannot take this route, but there's no other way to go, right? Is this run already over just 1 minute in? Well, not exactly. There just so happens to be one other route, even though it is very scuffed. First, we need to stand in this exact location and cast Enhanced Leap on ourselves. Then, by going into tactical mode and zooming all the way out, we get a slight view of another room. And then from here, by using jump in this exact spot, we can jump straight into and through the wall. I make sure to sneak, and then after reloading the game, we have successfully glitched our way into the helm, unseen by anyone. This zone here is sadly a forced fight. As soon as I did any action or moved at all, combat would start, but since I sneaked prior, the enemies have no idea that I'm even here and are completely focused on the Mind Flayer, so I could easily just jump over everything and escape. On the other side of the beach is a companion which will cause problems later unless we deal with her now, but thankfully she's very distracted trying to break open this door. With no way of hurting the intellect devourers without starting combat, I sneak past them and decide to also remove Asterion from the equation. Next to him lies a dying Mind Flayer, the very first bit of XP we at all have been able to get. XP is going to be the hardest thing to get here in the beginning, seeing as we only can take on encounters which we can one-shot. There happens to be one such over at the chapel entrance. Here we get use of Minor Illusion to lure all of the enemies together before killing them all with a stone block. Still not enough for level 2, but at least we're getting some XP. Obviously, we cannot approach the grove normally, as this would both trigger a cutscene and force us into combat. But by hugging this wall and using Enhanced Leap, we can just barely jump past the encounter completely. Another chunky bit of XP missed, but at least we are progressing. I enter the underground passage and come across 4 goblins that are just waiting. Here is the first time where we're going to make use of the stealth mechanic. By standing basically as far away as we possibly can and attacking with a ranged attack, combat won't actually immediately trigger. Instead, the game will stealth check us, and if we succeed, then no combat will trigger. This mechanic is what at all enables us to get XP this run, and will be how we take out most enemies. Enemies close by will come and search the area we were just at, which may sound like a downside, but as long as we move, it lets us manipulate them and move them wherever we want, letting us do fun things like this. With the goblins dead, I can finish off the wounded Findal and finally get level 2. The back route into the grove is now accessible, but upon entering I quickly noticed that it's basically impossible to traverse with all the NPCs walking around. It does mean that we miss out on the parasite, but that's fine as there just so happens to be another one right up the road towards the Blighted Village. In a normal playthrough, you would simply speak with these people and tell them to go away, but since we cannot do that, I decide to instead attack the dying man from range, causing them both to run to investigate. During this time, by dashing around the rock, I managed to sneak around them over to the corpse and collect the parasite. To enter the Blighted Village, we obviously cannot go the normal way, but there is an entrance to the right that skips the entire first interaction. The same thing can be done at the second Goblin encounter, letting me get all the way over to the Goblin Village. This does trigger the cutscene with the Absolute, but since Shadowheart is dead, she won't be here to interrupt us. I want to get into the Goblin Camp, but entering it won't be easy with all the goblins patrolling, so again we will have to go around it. There is a path to the right where only a few goblins are, and by timing my turn-based mode perfectly, I managed to line it up just right so that everyone is looking away. Now I just have to jump over to the cracked wall, blow up the goblins that would wake up from me hitting it, and make my way into the sanctum. Withers appears in camp now, and sadly we will have to speak with him at some point. There are a few encounters in this game which will require hirelings, so this is the first time that someone will have to see us. Might as well make use of his respec feature as well then. I decide to put my second level here into Rogue, as it gets both sneak attack and a bonus 2 extra to stealth, which will be very important here in the Sanctum. After collecting all the smoke powder barrels, it's time for the main reason I wanted to get here in the first place. As I said, enemies will try to reach us whenever we attack them from stealth, but sometimes they simply won't be able to, and this is the case right here. By standing on top of the pillars in the ceiling, we are free to take out a dozen of them without entering combat or them being able to do anything. Stealth in this game really is an underrated mechanic. With most of the Goblin Camp dead, it is time to make our way to the Underdark by lockpicking this door and sneaking past the ogre. There's a bunch of petrified drow here, which we easily can take out by just making sure to back out whenever the spectator approaches. I also picked up Falar Aluv along the way. Probably won't get any use of it, but you never know. The bullet decided to try and surprise attack me, but this is also easily avoidable by just scooting slightly over to the side and then just waiting for it to leave. Next up, I decided that I would try and take on the Dwergar waiting down by the lake. I do know where every single one of them are standing, so finding them would not be an issue. However, just attacking them normally would not work here, as I always, no matter where I stood, would be counted as too close and be forced into combat. To get around this, I instead ran all the way around and up this cliff. From here, we are so far away that even though the game does still surprise the Dwergar, it does not put us into combat with them. So completely free from any consequences, I could now just shoot away at Gek and his men without them being able to do anything. Entering the colony is not an option, but I can still go around and approach the lost Mushroom Man. He actually carries an invisibility scroll on him, and in his bag are 2 scrolls of Misty Step. After disposing of any evidence, we are basically done with everything we can do in the Underdark, at least for now. I move on towards the mountain pass and pick up the very important Smuggler's Ring from a skeleton for the extra +2 to stealth. Joaquin's Rest will have burnt down if we just leave immediately, so before going I also make sure to take out Floric for the free 150 XP. As always, the Gith are in our way, but they can easily be bypassed by just jumping down this ledge here behind the big dragon. Upon leaving for the mountain pass, Raphael appears as per usual, and it's time to grab a hireling here, since we will be needing one very soon anyways. Getting his 1400 XP is something I desperately want, but of course I can't actually let him spot us. So I make sure to carefully place down the silence without getting spotted, and then make my way over behind him, being very careful as to avoid his vision cone, beating him down all the way for another level up. With level 4, we get a feat and can now grab Sharpshooter, giving a massive +10 damage to all our ranged attacks. Now sadly, upon resting here, the first cutscene with the Dream Visitor will show up. This is something which is completely unavoidable, so sadly the Emperor is the second person which will always see us. In the mountain pass now, I take out Lady Esther from up on top of this cliff and loot the graceful cloth from her for a +2 to dexterity. Entering the creche, after a lot of trial and error, I managed to make it all the way over to the captain's quarters. But this room here is quite annoying. You see, entering the door triggers a cutscene, after which a bunch of Gith comes storming out of the room. So to not get spotted, I had to immediately enter turn-based mode and hide away in this corner here. In order to progress any further, I would have to get through the force field thingy. Pickpocketing the gift shard is easy enough, however we cannot actually deactivate it, as this triggers a dialogue in which we clearly get seen. So if I wanted to progress, I needed some other way of getting past it. I tried a bunch of stupid tricks, like resurrecting a hireling through the wall, or clipping through it, but nothing seemed to work. Not even climbing over it would work, as this is one of the few places in the game that actually has a roof. My plan of blowing up the Gith without them ever seeing me would have been funny, but I guess that won't be happening. Instead, it's time to make our way over to Act 2. Getting there is easy enough. Simply using the invisibility scroll we got previously is enough to get past all the undead guarding the way. But immediately upon leaving for Act 2, we run into another problem. After the instance loads, a cutscene triggers, where one singular goblin approaches us, asking if we are a true soul. This cutscene is nothing we can avoid as it triggers immediately upon entering Act 2, and would therefore count as being spotted, so we can't use this way. The only other way to Act 2 is through the Grimforge. Stealing the boat is easy enough, but there's another problem with this. Sailing away triggers another cutscene where Greymon and his men talks to us. We therefore cannot enter Act 2 without being seen. Or can we? Of course we can. It's time for another exploit. And this time, the first time we're using a hireling will be mandatory. We are not going to use him in any normal way though. Instead, we are going to recruit him into our party and then immediately execute him. Now with a dead hireling in my party, I return just before the cutscene and summon in a mage hand. I needed to be able to deal at least 14 damage, so to achieve this, I equip it with Valar Aluv and give it a strength elixir. Now I enter normally, and of course the cutscene triggers. However, before there's any time for the goblins to speak with me, I hit this button down here, swapping over to my dead hireling. Now that we have halted the cutscene before it could even start, the goblin and I are just standing there. And so here is where the mage hand comes in. As a summon, it cannot join dialogue, and therefore I can sneak over to it using the mage hand and kill it in one hit before combat can trigger at all. That's a lot of work to not get spotted by a single level 3 goblin, but we did it. Successfully now in Act 2, I jump past the trigger for the dialogue with the Absolute Worshippers and head down to where Karnis normally spawns in. By jumping to the side, we can avoid it for now and drop all of the explosives I have collected thus far on the ground. I now trigger the cutscene, and this one is one of the few ones in the game where we actually get a stealth option to not get spotted. Having the caravan walk past without noticing us right over to the pile of explosives, just where my mage hand is waiting. I actually lost the footage of me successfully doing this without the mage hand getting spotted, but trust me, it's very easy to do. You just have to position it up here instead of down next to them. Anyways, with the moon lantern now, we can move over to Moonrise where a certain vendor is that has an item that I really want. Traversing Moonrise without invisibility won't really be possible at all though, meaning that I need to get level 5 before proceeding. This would involve a lot of stealth shooting, but even though my stealth is pretty good right now, since I am shooting so many times, at some point it would be inevitable that I fail the roll. So to minimize this risk, it's time to pick up the most underrated spell in the entire game, Pass Without Trace. It's an aura which requires concentration, but gives all nearby companions, including ourselves, a plus 10 to all stealth checks. With it, we basically need to roll a critical failure with advantage in order to ever be seen, a 1 in 400. So it's on stupid stealth now. I just went around Act 1 and shot down every single person I could find. Everyone in Joaquin's Rest, the paladins next to Karlach, everyone in the Blighted Village, and finally most goblins outside the Goblin Camp, finally reaching level 5. Level 5 is important as it is the level in which Dwergar gets permanent invisibility. And even though I myself am not a Dwergar, I can still just recruit one from Withers, making sure to also teach it Minor Illusion. Returning to Moonrise, I could now cast invisibility, and as long as I was careful to avoid the scrying eyes, no one would be able to spot me. The vendor I wanted an item from is Lantarv. He's standing here, but there's no real way to pickpocket him where he is, so it's time to use the janky Minor Illusion to move him away. This took a really long time as there simply are too many people here, but after 10 minutes or so, I managed to get him all the way out of Moonrise. We can now pickpocket him and collect the Titan String Bow, the by far highest damage bow in the game as it gains damage from both dexterity and strength. To get use of the bow, I will need some strength, but thankfully Auntie Ethel here has an unlimited supply of strength potions alongside invisibility potions. All I needed to do was pickpocket her, take a quick rest, and then repeat the process. Now with some really nice damage, it was time to clear out Moonrise. And since as long as I make sure to stand far enough away, we won't get spotted, this was probably the easiest time I have ever had doing this. After a while, I had cleared out the entire bottom floor on Moonrise, and so decided to go after the Thorns. Gerringoth is the first one. For some reason, she does not care about stealth and will always proc the encounter no matter where I attack her from. I did notice that if I was fast enough, I could shoot her once and then move back to camp without provoking her. But this also meant that she would immediately heal afterwards, so I would basically have to finish this fight in a single move. To do this, it was time to bring out a arrow of roaring thunder. It pushes anyone it hits a few meters, perfect as Gerringoth's patrol pattern has her standing here in front of a window. It took a few tries, but eventually I got it right. With all of her armor gone, I now could just run down and finish her off with a few final arrows. Next up was Malice. There are these small holes in the roof directly overlooking him, so all I had to do was once again stand here and shoot arrows. This is just insanely overpowered. And the same could even be done with the Kuatoa from up on the ledge. I swear man, anytime a stealth archer exists in any game, it will just be the best thing ever. With them all dead and level 6 acquired, it was time to enter the Gauntlet of Shar. The first encounter can easily be broken by using Minor Illusion, as it spawns in and breaks the AI of the Justiciar completely. If I just headed straight for the Night Song's prison, Balthazar would meet us, so before doing that we have to take him out. But the normal way of simply opening the door won't work, as it would involve us getting into combat. So finally, we require greater invisibility, which also means needing level 7. Back to the grind, I guess. To get it, I had to kill Jurgir, everyone in Moonrise, and Last Light, which just barely was enough to get us to level 7. If you don't know how greater invisibility works, it's pretty stupid. It works just like normal invisibility, but after doing anything that would normally break invisibility, we can instead just succeed a stealth check and remain invisible. This means that I now could just walk over to Balthazar's door and use knock without ever revealing myself, and then just wait until the Justiciar took care of it for me. Balthazar's death meant that the path to the Night Song was free, but upon arriving I realized that I had been really stupid and done all of this for no reason. Because of course, in order to free the Night Song, we need to speak with the Night Song, which I'm sure you understand is not allowed. But without freeing her, Ketheric simply won't go to the roof, and therefore the way into the Mind Flayer colony won't ever open. So what's the answer? Of course, it's another weird trick jump. Down in the prison of Moonrise is a room in which you normally get taken by getting dragged to jail. Jumping down the hole in it brings us down right next to the Mind Flayer colony, and despite my character being certain that there's no way of getting in, there is in fact a way. By positioning myself right here, and just like we did all the way back in the Nautiloid, entering tactical view and zooming all the way out, we can see directly into the Mind Flayer colony. So after casting Enhanced Leap and Invisibility to not get spotted, we just have to perform a semi-precise trick. There's this Intellect Devourer patrolling back and forth, and by jumping just in front of it, the game won't know where to put us and therefore just spits us out right next to it, inside of the colony, without needing to ever talk to Ketheric or the Night Song. Before heading down, I made sure to move all my remaining explosives to one of my hirelings. I casted Greater Invisibility on myself and headed over next to Ketheric, dropping them all off in this location. I then freed the Night Song, which does start combat between her and Ketheric, but that doesn't really matter. All that's important is that we're not in it and he's no longer immortal. And now it's the first time where Greater Invisibility really gets to shine. As with all the stealth I've stacked, I can simply attack Ketheric over and over and over without ever entering combat until he dies. Merkel gets summoned without the cutscene even triggering, and I immediately use a firebolt to ignite the bombs, instantly killing him before my invisibility ever runs out. With Merkel and Ketheric gone, all that's left now is to grab the Netherstone, wait for Ailing to leave the arena, and then follow her out. We have not quite made it to Act 3 yet though, we still need to get through the Gith. So far, some encounters have been annoying to deal with, but here comes the first one, which is a true problem. It's always this one that gives me problems during these stupid challenge runs. If you're unaware, once you take a long rest here, you get ambushed by 3 Gith that open a portal. This fight starts immediately and counts as taking taking a long rest, meaning that any mage hand shenanigans or prior setup we try to do will be completely reset. As far as I can tell, getting spotted by these three is unavoidable. The best I could do was just escape through the portal before more could arrive. We're now in the astral plane, and after sneaking past a few more Gith, we arrive down at the Emperor. This encounter here will also be a problem. It forces us into a cutscene with the Emperor, and after the cutscene ends, straight into combat. You might think that simply turning invisible before would be the solution, but sadly, invisibility is removed as soon as the cutscene starts. Thankfully, this time, since it is not a long rest, there is a way around this. To make this work, I'm once again going to need to kill one of my hirelings, and then make sure to drop 2 invisibility potions on the floor next to my characters. Afterwards, just like we did in Act 2, I am now going to summon in my mage hand, triggering the cutscene. I can now swap over to my dead hireling and through them my mage hand, throwing the 2 invisibility potions on my characters to turn them invisible before dismissing the hand. Since the invisibility is removed when the cutscene starts and not when combat does, after it ends, even though we do get into combat, I have not been seen as all my characters are invisible. Thanks to Pass Without Trace, I am now free to do whatever I wish without the Gith being able to target me at all. The first 2 stand perfectly to get pushed right off with a Thunder Wave, and during the second turn I do the same thing to another one. Due to some bad positioning, I accidentally tank a full fireball to the face, but luckily succeed the concentration saving throw, letting me also push the final one off as well. With that, we can finally leave for Act 3. Since Act 3 is so full of people, I will have to traverse it basically solely using the Dwergar's invisibility. But right away, I get approached by this apparently omniscient child as she just ignores invisibility to speak with me. It is thankfully possible to skip past it completely just by jumping down the cliff here. Arriving at Worm's Rock, it's time to fight Gortash. Or maybe fight is an overstatement. More like just completely obliterate him while he and all his Steel Watchers are helpless to do anything. Yep, this build is probably the strongest one I've ever tried, since we don't even have to enter combat to win. 2 of the 3 Netherstones collected, just 1 more left now. In order to reach Orin, we will need Saravok's amulet, and to get to him, we need to go through a certain assassin. Dollar normally leaves after the conversation is started, but it turns out that shooting him works just as well. After leaving, we can find him again in the Facemaker's boutique, attempting a murder on its owner. The cutscene that triggers here is also unavoidable, as it starts as soon as we open any door, but it does have a stealth option, letting us slip into the shadows and just wait it out. Now it's just a matter of turning on the greater invisibility, shooting him down, and collecting the note in order to enter the murder tribunal. And 1 lockpick door later, we arrive at Saravok. And what's the method we're gonna use to kill him? It's all greater invisibility, okay? It was just the best way of killing these guys without entering combat, okay? I know it's boring, but it is what it is. With the amulet now in hand, we head into the sewers and get approached by Orin, concealed as the child. I don't know what it is about this child in particular, but anyone that looks like them seems to be able to just ignore invisibility. So to not get caught here, as soon as Orin appears on screen, I make sure to just head back to camp before the conversation can start at all. 2 open doors later, and we can finally approach Orin for the last Netherstone. The most interesting thing that happened in this fight is the fact that Orin turned into a gore pile while I was looting her. Really, she also stood no chance. All 3 Netherstones now collected, I headed for the Morphic Pool. There are a bunch of rats here, but to avoid them, I just had to make sure that all of my party was invisible before going to the boat. Skipping past the Intellect Devourer fight, it is time for the first cutscene with the Netherbrain, meaning another character that has seen us, putting the total up to 6. Of course, I failed to subdue it, and make sure to turn myself into a Mind Flayer before approaching the final area of the game, where right away another hireling needs to be sacrificed. The room where Withers and all our non-existing allies normally stand is mostly empty since we haven't spoken to anyone, but this little merchant guy is still here. So to not get seen by him, I therefore had to jump over this huge ledge on the left side. In the same way, there's a cutscene with 6 guards just up the stairs. This cutscene has a huge area in which it will trigger, so to avoid it, I did have to steer away quite far to the right height, and then fly right over the wall. Getting past the rest of the encounters is easy enough, and we arrive at the brainstem. Of course, there's another forced cutscene here, which also removes invisibility and leads to combat. This is why, for the last time, a hireling is dead, as we will need to use the mage hand trick one final time to regain invisibility after the cutscene triggers. With the invisibility here, combat doesn't even trigger, so without entering it, we can make it all the way over to the crown and use greater invisibility without getting spotted. Before attempting to enter, I make sure to also buff my allies with fierce perilous stakes, as this is how we're going to kill the brain. At this point, I thought I had been really clever and that the portal will simply open when I used Karsus's compulsion, but that's not quite how it went. It turns out that you can't actually open the portal unless you're specifically in combat. So after succeeding the stealth check, my character just kinda stood there channeling the spell forever. To at all open it, I therefore had to break my invisibility. It does immediately open the portal, but it's still kinda sad that it refused to work the other way. At least all my other characters are still invisible, freely letting them follow me into the final encounter with the brain. This fight is as easy as ever, as it just took 2 turns of magic missiles to finish it off. So all in all, you sadly cannot beat Baldur's Gate completely without being seen. I had hoped to at least keep it to just the Emperor, Withers, and the Nether Brain, but I just couldn't find a way around not getting seen by those 3 gifts. Thanks for watching these stupid videos as always. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.